Welcome to the next episode of Becoming a Post-Growth Planner, Challenges and Obstacles to Changing Roles and Practices. I'm Christian Lamker, Assistant Professor for Sustainable Transformation and Regional Planning at the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. And this morning, we do this recording in the morning, I have Vincent Liegey with me, zooming in from Budapest, a real expert on degrowth in the French degrowth movement, but also very active in Budapest right now. So Vincent, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Hello, Christian. Hello, everybody. Thanks for inviting me for this podcast. So my name is Vincent, or Vincent Liegey. You pronounce my name very well in the French accent, which is not so easy. So I have two parallel lives somehow, because when I'm not in Budapest, I am more in trains, in a train station, in universities, in a research institute, in a political institution to give talks about degrowth and to try to lobby to open the debate on degrowth, and we'll speak more about what do I mean by degrowth. And when I am in Budapest, I'm more like experiencing in my everyday life what could be a degrowth way of life. While coordinating with some friends, cooperative, connecting together a local organic farm, a bicycle shop where we construct cargo bikes, logistics center when we use a cargo bike to distribute our locally seasonal produce vegetable, organic vegetable, and also we have different type of project. Like we have two urban gardens in Budapest, one based on urban agroforestry, another one based on permaculture, and a lot of projects on education, on research, and also a lot of convivial activities, which has been quite challenging in the last 1.5 years due to COVID. But we hope that we can go back on our good rhythm what we used to have before the COVID arrived. So I am, to simplify, I'm like a political activist, a researcher, publishing articles, books, and so on, and also try to be a practitioner and experience in my everyday life.
Thank you.
How
Yeah,
to
I have your recent book here, Exploring Degrowth, a critical guide written together with Anitra Nelson, came out last year, where you also explain that degrowth is simultaneously developing by debate and by action. And it's good to see that you somehow do both. So I would propose first to focus a bit on the debate. What would you summarize as the major lesson, the invitation that degrowth offers for cities, maybe even towards urban and spatial planners?
So degrowth is a very a large debate, because it's radically, so taking from the roots, criticizing the model of society we are living in and the dominant imaginary we are all in. And it's a radical critics to growth. And when I speak about growth, I speak, of course, about economic growth. But speaking about growth is also speaking about all these imaginaries that always more means better. And the dominant imaginary is really about that. And it's the same for the cities, the planners. It's always about development. It's always about quicker, bigger, stronger, more powerful. It's always about more and more connections between the large cities and etc., etc. So degrowth is questioning culturally whether it really makes sense. Aren't we facing physical and cultural limits to growth? So, of course, the physical limits to growth, unfortunately, it's maybe already too late. We start to face it. I was listening to the news this morning, and the world is literally burning all around the world. You have huge fires, which are the consequences of this model of society, which is attacking biodiversity, which is attacking climate, creating climate change, etc., etc. So we are already facing these physical limits to growth, which is the case for cities, where you reach a limit that you cannot extend indefinitely. You have physical limits to the construction you can do, and so on. And but what is very interesting that we connected it with the cultural limits to growth. So it's not only that it's impossible to keep on going with the same model of society from a physical point of view or environmental, energetical point of view, but we should question whether it really makes sense, whether this way of life to be like the hamster in the wheel, to keep on running quicker and quicker in the wheel without any mean, is really something which we would like to do. And degrowth is questioning our relationship with nature, with our the time, with work, with our production, with care, with ecofeminism, with domination, with a lot of topics. And I think it's a very inspiring also for planners, because we are in a, I really believe, at the crossroads of our civilization. The former civilization we've been growing up is about to reach its limits. It's about to collapse. Maybe collapse has already started. It's going to be a long process. And it's time to question ourselves how to organize the transition, and the transition to go where. And that's what degrowth is questioning. So radical critics to the dominant system, to decolonize our imaginary, and to be able to start to think about a democratic, serene transition toward new models of society based on other type of values like conviviality, like enjoyment of life or care.
Yeah, in your work, you also talk about relocalizing the economy, or about open and altruistic relocalization, focusing on what makes us human. Can you explain what this means? It has definitely a spatial aspect in it.
Yes, so we are now living in a world which is totally absurd, and which is ecological and energetical tragedy. Everything is traveling quicker and quicker all around the world. It's what we could see in the beginning of the confinement in the time of these COVID-19 pandemics, where we closed the borders. We started to realize that we are depending on a very powerful but weak infrastructure. Like it turned out that in Europe, 90% of the active principles of medicines are not produced anymore in Europe. So just for basic medicines, we depend on this very large infrastructure and so on. It's unsustainable from an energy and environment point of view. So we have to relocalize for these reasons, to somehow rationalize. We should produce locally what can be produced locally. But I would say it's not the most important. I mean, that one is very obvious. Of course, we should do it because of that. But it's even more important that to relocalize our productions, to relocalize our economies, to relocalize our democracies and human interaction, etc. It's also an opportunity to be conscious again about what is behind this illusion of freedom to consume. So nowadays, when you live in a large city like Budapest or any other large city in the world, you go to a supermarket, you go to a shop, you go to a restaurant, or you just take your mobile phone and you order online whatsoever. And you do it because you don't see what kind of banality of evil, to quote Hannah Arendt, is behind, what kind of barbarities is behind. So behind this illusion of freedom to consume, to buy stuff, you have human and nature exploitation. And to relocalize is to face again what the reality of our way of life. If you had the mines of cobalt in your garden, with children working in your garden to get the cobalt, you would rethink using the devices, what I'm using now to talk to you. If you had the impact of the chemical pollution of the clothes, what you buy in fast fashion trends, what we can see all around the world and so on. And if you had it in your glass, in your water, and you couldn't drink your tap water anymore, you would rethink these things and so on. And I think it would be very important to reconnect the people, to reconnect ourselves to the reality of what's really happening in the world, and also to reconstruct type of local solidarities. So that's the story about relocalization. And we really insist on open relocalization, to be very clear that it's not about protect ourselves against the foreigners, the stranger. It's not about against the Chinese. It's not against the refugees. On the contrary, it's about solidarity. So it should be done in connection with other territories, because if we stop consuming type of products which are produced far away, we will create some chaos, economic chaos, for the people who are producing our product. So it should be somehow planned. It should be somehow done in a consultation, in dialogue, in solidarity, and relocalization, to start to produce locally what can be produced locally in questioning what are our basic needs and how to reach sustainability around these basic needs should be done in dialogue and in solidarity with other territories. Moreover, climate change and biodiversity loss is creating some chaos, and we will need more and more solidarities between the territories. We can see with the large fires that maybe we'll have to host people, maybe we'll have to send food, to send water, to send some basic resources to each other and so on. So open relocalization is about being rational to relocalize what can be relocalized. There is no, it's unmeaningful to produce, to make sheep or tomatoes travel all around the world. And it's about reconnected to the reality, to be an adult and to see what the impact of our choices are in terms of human exploitation and nature destruction. And it's about solidarity. It's about doing it in open borders and in dialogue with all the people all around the world.
Yeah. So there are good rational aspects to really take in degrowth thinking. I have to add that we have the beginning of August when we do this recording, so we do just experience large fires in Turkey, in Greece, and other countries around the Mediterranean that show catastrophic impacts of climate change, of increasing climate change as well. And I read into one of your online articles where I read the headline, "Get religion out of the economy, freeing ourselves from such addictions." So the problem gets deeper to rational thinking that something needs to change, but it's something that may be as difficult to change as religious belief, as an addiction. So what is the major challenge to really change our mindset to become something like a planners who take in degrowth thinking?
Yeah, it's a new religion of our modern era. We think only in economic terms. So economics can be a very interesting tool. Economics is economos. It means gestion of your home, and it's something very important. But it became a religion. Like if you speak about climate change, you would question how much it will cost. Right? It's not about how much it will cost. It's about how will our children have a chance to have a decent life on this planet. So it's about survival, and you cannot calculate survival in terms of economy. And somehow we had an interesting experience with the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemics, because for the first time for decades, suddenly economics for a very short while was put in a secondary position, that we decided to stop the economy to protect our health system, to protect lives. But it didn't last long, because after we had the type of authoritarian restriction to save the economy again, try to find the balance between the pandemics and the economy. And it's the same with climate change and biodiversity loss, or all the energy and environmental challenges what we face. Mainstream economics, mainstream politicians try to say or try to believe that you can keep on going with economic growth and in the same time save the planet. It's what we call decoupling. It's what we call green growth. And it's something which is unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, impossible. And we are trying to desperately keep on going in this direction. And GDP is correlated with energy consumption and with CO2 emissions. Whatever we do, we cannot have a decoupling between both and so on. And degrowth is really an invitation to put back the economy in its right place. So I'm talking now from Budapest, and Budapest was the city of Karl Polanyi, because he was Hungarian. And Karl Polanyi wrote a very fantastic book called The Great Transformation, where he really spoke about that. He really tried to understand. He wrote it in 1944. Tried to understand the connection between this liberal economic system, where the market starts to be totally dominant in our imaginary, in our society, and how it drove Europe to the tragedies of the last century. And now it's the same, not with wars, but with climate change and so on. So the question is, to quote Polanyi, how to re-embed the economy. So it's not like against economy, it's about putting back the economy in the right place. So economy could be a fantastic tool if it's a tool in the service of democracy, of politics, and not the contrary. And it's degrowth from this perspective is a radical critics to capitalism, to ultraliberalism, where we are embedded now, And it's really the question how to put back the economy in the right place. So to how to re-question what are meaningful lives and how the economy could be a tool helping us to make the transition out of this growth model of society or addiction to growth to new models of society based on other type of values, and to question what are our basic needs, how to fulfill them in a sustainable and in a desirable way.
And you yourself are part of a transition of experimentation happening in Budapest with Cargonomia. Can you explain a bit what that is and what you're doing there? And I read that it's about low-tech logistics, about transportation, but also about food, about community. Can you give us an idea what it is, what you're doing, and how this is different?
So in Budapest, we had the opportunity. We started like 10 years ago. It was first a long process to design something, and we had the opportunity to start to be autonomous and to experience alternative way of life around food, about transportation. We were lucky. It's not the case so much anymore. The city changed in the last 2-3 years with economic development. But we were lucky that there was a very strong network of alternatives, and in particular alternative bars in which we could develop a lot of workshop and discussion and debate, and in which people were experimenting a lot of different type of low-tech, sustainable ways of life. And we started with different partners, first focusing on food and in particular organic farming, where we have a farm next to Budapest called Zsamboki Biokert, where we produce organic vegetable without using any kind of fossil entrance. So it's only seasonal, it's only with good technique of composting and a lot of labor, and also a lot of sometimes hard work, but enjoyment of life and conviviality. We have two gardens in Budapest, one in a hill just next to where I am, in the Buda Hills, in Sasel, which means the Hill of the Eagles, which is based on permaculture, and another one which is in cooperation with the municipality of a district of Budapest in Zugló, which is more based on urban agroforestry. And all these three projects are really type of pilot projects. So with Cargonomia, we never wanted to grow. We never wanted to transform the city based on growing our activities, but more in changing the mindset of the people, in showing some example and in sharing the knowledge, in opening debates, in welcoming people and so on. So with that system, we want to show that you can make Budapest again self-sufficient in food production. Like most of the large cities in Europe, and Budapest was maybe one of the last one to still have this type of self-sufficiency. Till the 1980s, Budapest was self-sufficient in vegetable productions, for example. So we want to push the municipalities, the mindset of the people to go back to such situation. And we connect it with logistic and transport, where we were both the first one. So you're from Netherlands. It's not so sexy in Netherlands because it's something which is quite well developed, which was not the case in Hungary in the time we started, or in France where I'm from. We started to self-construct cargo bikes and trailers and start to use it to transport a lot of different type of goods, in particular locally produced vegetable and so on. So we had a type of strong pillar with activities and a large network with different type of partners where we could also develop a lot of other type of debates, workshop, discussion, festivals and so on around degrowth, around low tech, around open relocalization, around ecofeminism, around care, around education, and all these type of things. Unfortunately, the situation is a bit difficult nowadays because Budapest faced a very quick economic development based on mass tourism in the last 5 years, and a large part of our partners faced economic trouble and have been following type of gentrification dynamics, have been pushed out. So even they closed or they moved to the suburbs and so on. So we lost a bit this informal type of very intense network within the city center of Budapest. And also we suffered a lot from the COVID-19 restrictions because our activities were really based on human interaction and conviviality. And when you are when you confined at home, it's very difficult to have informal solidarities and so on. So now we are a bit like in a transition time, and we start to rethink and to relaunch a project based on the uncertainty COVID is offering, and also based on how the city changed. Last but not least, Budapest elected a green mayor 2 years ago, with quite close to our ideas, and a good friend of some of us. And we have a lot of friends now in a lot of district municipalities. But it's also very difficult, and it's also something we should. I'm working a lot based on also around the municipalist movement. It's very difficult to organize this type of low-tech degrowth way of life in large cities, in working with type of institution and organization which are based on much more larger institution and bureaucratic infrastructure and so on. And here there is a debate, and we are also experimenting, not only in Budapest, in a lot of cities. And it's a debate, it's a type of discussion, for example, I have with Zagreb, who just elected also a green mayor, how to reconnect a local life with a large infrastructure and bureaucratic institution, and how to organize the transition around all these type of things.
So you have quite some experience in working together with the municipality, with politicians, with public officials. Looking towards the future, would you have any hopes, any wishes, or also demands towards municipalities? What kind of support is really needed, or where is the largest challenge to overcome to really support initiatives such as yours?
I really believe, and I've been working a lot on that we should find a way to disconnect our freedom and the need to make bullshit jobs, to rethink the economy and liberating time. So I've been working a lot on sharing hours for work, work less to give a chance to everybody to have a job. And in working less, you also provide more free time to the people to start to be active in local initiatives. And I really believe in bottom-up, grassrooted movements and so on. The second point could be the implementation of type of unconditional basic income. In our book, we developed the idea of unconditional autonomy allowance, which would be a type of basic income, which would be given not only in cash, but also in free access to public services, some goods and so on. And in doing so, you give the freedom to the people to reappropriate free time, and also to rethink in a democratic way, in a deliberative way, what are our basic needs and how to fulfill them locally in a sustainable and fair way. And last but not least, I really believe in the logic of the commons, where we should implement type of cooperation with public institution to rethink public-private property, and to give the opportunity to local citizens to reappropriate spaces, and to experiment type of self-organized spaces. It's what you can see all around the world. There are interesting dynamics. I think about, for example, Tiers-Lieu in France, where you have more and more self-organized public spaces given to citizens or organizations to do different type of activities. It's what we had the opportunity to do in Budapest in the time where real estate was very cheap, where local citizens could reappropriate large spaces to experiment alternative way of life. And I really believe in the power of collective intelligence. And I think nowadays what could be, and now I'm addressing a bit to planners, we should be influenced by experiences of direct democracy projects. For example, in France, we just have the Citizen Convention for Climate, where 150 citizens were randomly chosen, and had 1 year to reflect on how to implement radical transformation of our economies to face climate change, but also in respecting social justice. And they ended up with something very radical, very smart, with 150 proposals, quite close to the proposal we have in our book, Exploring Degrowth, and in general in degrowth and so on. And it shows that if you provide the right space for citizens and you trust them to question what are their basic needs and how to fulfill them in a meaningful way, what are environmental challenges, energetic challenges, and how to deal with them in implementing solutions which are much more like radical transformation of our institution, of our society, and so on, you end up with very meaningful solution. And I think it's something, and I'm pushing for that. We did it in Budapest. For example, I'm pushing it also in Zagreb, and I have some friends in the new municipality. A lot of cities in France also started to implement it, to implement this type of citizen convention, questioning what are meaningful life and how to implement it and how to organize a transition.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that very well connects to planning, as much of planning is somehow oriented towards action, about also changing things, making things happen. Though, of course, it remains challenging to change the mindset that's behind us. So to get a bit towards the end, what would be your summary about post-growth planning? So if I asked you to finish the sentence, post-growth planning is?
Recently, a very good friend told me that degrowth can simply be substituted by democracy, both starts with D. And I think the main challenge of our society nowadays is really to rethink democracy. We can see that we have this contradiction. On one hand, the democratic system, which is mostly limited to the representative democratic tools, which can be meaningful and useful for certain type of democratic decision, is dysfunctional. There is rising discredit, lack of trust on our democratic institution, on political parties. The political parties are more and more like empty entities and so on. There is no strong participation in this model. Like in France, we got the shock in the last local regional elections. There was a record of abstention in time where people are, based on a lot of surveys and polls, are more and more concerned by politics. So you have this gap between the will to have more democracy and type of political institution which are not working anymore. So we need a type of creativity to involve more and more the people in planning, in how to rethink, how to organize a transition in our society. And we need even more participation, because when you want to implement type of radical transformation, which will mean stress, which will mean questioning type of inequalities, which will mean maybe questioning type of property and redistribution, it will create even more conflicts. It will create even more tension. So the only way to do it in a non-violent way, and it's necessary to implement it, the only way to do it in the less violent way as much as possible will be to be creative and to involve as much as possible the people in dialogue towards that. So I think that the emergency is to slow down and to invent type of political entity where people could meet and reflect together on where we are and where do we want to go together.
Thank you, Vincent. So I see there is urgency, there is emergency, but there is also hope. There is ways how things can change. This also reminds me to one sentence by Jason Hickel in the foreword to your book. We know that a better world is not only possible, it is waiting to be born.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I hope we can all together be part of this birth in the upcoming time.
And I would say it's already here. If we look with other type of glasses, we can see that there are a lot of great things already happening in our everyday life, in our societies. And we should put the focus on all these type of things and give them a chance to be more visible, and give a chance to the people who maybe have less chance to be active in it, to get the opportunity to also reappropriate some more enjoyment of life in a sustainable and meaningful way.
Okay, thanks again, Vincent Liegey, for joining me today, for sharing your thoughts, and let's keep on discussing this and also taking action.
Thanks, Christian. Bye.